Put on the penny. Turn on the chat. I said we're going to turn on the penny. It's machine. There we go. All right. One of those days nothing is working right. All right, I'm going to start with some caramel vodka with apple cider. That's the ratio. Hey, Chris. Hey, Mona. Welcome along. I'm going ahead and getting started here. So we're going to run the tour as advertised. Hey, Eric. Hey, Bridget. I also got a larger than usual for me cup of bourbon over here. Much larger. Really, when I'm drinking, I normally nurse a drink all night. Hey, Karen. Hey, Todd. Hey, Mary. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Don. Today's been a day.
Who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable, in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago.
Hey, Heather.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest
Hey, Don. Hey, Kim.
Blue Skies.
Yeah, Bridget. One of those days. Oh yeah, we'll be drowning in the car sorrows. All $3,600 worth of them. And the jack-up in price of the bus for the ghost tour. So this was an expensive fucking day. Hey Amy, hey Rodney, hey Betsy. Oh yeah, we're gonna be swearing some tonight. I'm not gonna be holding my mouth back. Yeah, the car will be ready tomorrow, but $4,000 or so later. And get this, they have the nerve to email me and say, you know, we just had a customer looking for a car just like this. We could cut you an incredible deal if you'd like to trade it in. Look, when I went to high school in the 90s, they still had high school economics that taught us how to buy a car if you ever got stuck in the 1970s. And they tried to pull crap like that. Hey, euphoniums. You copper-belled euphoniums. Dress rehearsal, all right. Theremins, those are hard to rehearse. Hey, Joanne. Hey, Jeanette. Hey, Katie. Oh, yeah, they tried to get me to buy new tires, too, and an oil change. I was like, we could change your oil for only $75. Like, I can get it done cheaper than that. And they're like, well, I know the Jiffy Lube over there charges $99. I was like, they do not. Well, here you are, Kathleen. All right, welcome along. Well, Chris, I won't say anything I wouldn't have said in front of my kid. And Nancy. That's really just the brake system. Second opinions are it would cost even more. Plus, I would have to get it to someplace else now. Now that's a trick, because it can't be driven right now. Yeah. Nothing makes me madder than car stuff going wrong. It just makes me the most irritable and pissed off that I get. It's just trauma of having to deal with all the hillbillies. When I was first driving and when Snellville, Georgia was still much more of a redneck town than it is now. Good night, Mom. My mom does not want to stick around to see this, I see. Kathy, you see, if you rent, you don't have to buy a refrigerator. That's somebody else's problem. Ooh, they're doing new boo buckets again. I got all three from last year up on the thing over here. Gary, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I lost my mother while telling stories of Snellville, Georgia, where we moved when I was in high school, back when it was really a redneck town.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Purple one. I don't know if I approve. I already got orange. Purple is a Halloween color. It's okay, I guess. Hey, Beth in Dallas. And Dela. But yeah, I don't have a purple one, so I should get one. But that involves getting to a McDonald's. There is one walking distance. No, two walking distance. 3 if I want to take a hike. There are multiple McDonald's walking distance from me. The purple one's a vampire? Yeah, I need that one. But yeah, welcome along, everybody. Been a garbage day in the neighborhood today. And then after all of the car crap, my package got delivered. They sent me, your package has been delivered with a picture of a building that I don't recognize, but it sure wasn't mine. Got on the help chat, they said, yeah, a guy named Stalin says, yes, we can replace it. You'll just have to send back the first one. And like, but I can't send back the first one. I had to talk to like 5 people before I could explain that. And they're jacking up the bus cost on the Ghost Tour. I still need to sell several more just to break even. And Katie, I don't even live in the burbs. It's a little too far from the train line. You gotta stay away from the train line because those railroad men will drink up your blood like wine. Hey, Miles. Hey, baby. There's the guy. I'll eventually get my package. Telling of the miracle day you came along. Evening, everybody. Hey, Amy, I don't come to you with my problems. Just kidding. Oh yes, this will be a drunk tour, and it's been one of those days where if it can go wrong, it will. The spinach turned out to have gone bad even. I had to go get more spinach. Hey Marie, we just got a Culver's kind of nearby here. They've been slowly moving into the city.
Benny Goodman goes away back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny, Walk. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Oh, we could call Matt Gates. We could do that. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. We got a few minutes yet before we're supposed to start up properly. We could do that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can do that. I'll turn down the Benny a little bit, and you can always call these guys offices. Yeah, we could do that. The Honorable Matt Gates. There's a laugh. All right. I've called Jim many times to challenge him to a wrestling match. I am the hipster. I will break bones in your body. You do so obscure you probably never even heard of them. This will just be a very basic one.
Thank you for calling the office of Congressman Matt Gates. We are currently unavailable to take your call. Please leave your name and a number where you can be reached, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again for calling. Have a great day.
Yeah, Matt, I just wanted to confirm the rumor that one day you went to a barber with a picture of Butthead, as in Beavis and Butthead, and said, make me look like this. You've got the exact same haircut. You've got the exact same upper lip snarl. You think you're fooling anybody, Butthead? All right. Yep. Here's the Benny, everybody. Welcome along, everybody. We're going to do the drunk HH Holmes tour tonight. I'm working my way through an apple cider with caramel vodka, which is utterly delicious. But really, look at a picture of that guy and look at a picture of Butthead. It's uncanny.
And they all loved it. They all loved those bastards when they played by Benny Goodman.
Jim Jordan looks like if Beavis lost all his hair. You're never gonna score, Beavis. Hey, Catherine. Nice to meet you, too. This is an unusual night to see me. It's been a rough day, so I am going to be drinking the day away. Peach iced tea is a great choice as well. One does not need to actually be drinking the night, except for me, on account of I advertised it that way. You guys donated a lot last time I did this, so okay. Kinda needed having just had a $4,000 diagnosis today. Between car and bus travel for the ghost tours. Yeah, caramel vodka. I didn't know I had any, but I found some in the cabinet. I got some of that good Trader Joe's spiced cider, so I've been working my way through this. Hey, Hannah! Over on YouTube. So I've done the HH Holmes talks enough that I could probably about do it in my sleep. We'll see if I can do it drunk. I mean, the ghost tours, I was doing 300 ghost tours a year at one point. I think I actually did do it in my sleep a few times for the 10 o'clock tour. Yeah, rough few days all around. Carol, yes, I have read Devil in the White City. I have, in fact. Uh-huh. And a good choice. Hey, Bernadette, things will always get better. Well, Mr. Mellencamp wrote, sometimes you get sick and you don't get better. And that's when life is short, even in its longest days. What I am grateful for is the brakes didn't suddenly go out like on the way to Indianapolis for that Dylan concert at which he covered Longest Days. Or on the way back even. We managed to make it back first. So that's good. It's a Longest Days miracle. But yes, for people asking in the comments, I have in fact read Devil in the White City. Yeah. It's been a little while, but I've read it. Oh, we can comment on that a little bit later. Sherry, that's awesome. Okay. Benny is wrapping it up. Eleanor, the car is going to be fine tomorrow. $3,600 later. All right, Larry. So, Larry, I'm now Larry's cousin. I have just been cousin adopted. But all right. Hey, Mike. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome along. Tonight we are doing the drunk edition of the HH Holmes Talk. I've been doing HH Holmes Talks for over 10 years in the city of Chicago. I've been doing them virtually here for over 3 years now, including, remember that one night in like March or April? I think it was a lot of your first tours when suddenly we had like 4,000 people come on one of my HH Holmes Talks. That was kind of a surprise. That meant also we had about 40 people afterwards saying, I couldn't log on, this was all a scam, I kept clicking on this picture. I don't know what to tell you guys. It was the early days of the pandemic. People had not really figured out Facebook Live or streaming video yet. I had people like going to the Eventbrite page and thinking it would just start. Dark days, but the numbers were good. So welcome along, everybody. I am Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I have been a tour guide and historian for going on 20 years now here in Chicago. Got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, now available on audiobook, to my great surprise. Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, co-written with Michael Glover Smith, with whom I just saw four Bob Dylan concerts, and we'll see another in December, if not before. I Kissed a Zombie and I Liked It, that's neither here nor there. Murder Maps USA, which also included some H.H. Holmes content. The new Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. There'll be a couple of walking tours there this weekend. And Graceland was founded by one of Holmes' single biggest individual swindling victims. And most relevant for tonight, the massive H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. I have talked about Holmes since then, and before then, really, on shows like Haunted History, which is now on Hulu, and on American Ripper. I was on about half of the episodes of that one. Worked on that for quite a little while. So, one thing I'll say right now, one thing that we found with H.H. Holmes is that quite a lot of what we do when we tell the story of H.H. Holmes, the story of the guy who had the murder castle that he used to prey on World's Fair visitors, a lot of this comes from a book called Gem of the Prairie, which is now published under the name Gangs of Chicago by Herbert Asbury. It's a companion to like Gangs of New York. So, There was a chapter in this book about H.H. Holmes, The Monster of 63rd Street, that for several decades was about all most people could get if they wanted to find out about H.H. Holmes. It was the only place you were ever likely to hear about the guy for a really long time. And he kind of mixed some real stuff with some stuff that he got from tabloids and some stuff that he just outright made up. But that was the template. That's what everybody has gone on ever since then. About 20 years ago now, I was working for a company that wanted to start me doing H.H. Holmes Devil in the White City tours. And I enjoyed Devil in the White City, but it all took place in like 3 locations. It wasn't really enough to get a good tour going. So I started researching a lot more H.H. Holmes stuff, and I ended up finding all kinds of stuff. There was stuff in the legal archives. There was stuff in the microfilm room. And really found out that we've been telling this story all wrong. This really pisses some people off. But tonight since I have done this talk many times, I have done it in libraries, I have done it on television, I have done it in walking tours, I have done it in bus tours, I have done it on a boat, I have done it in a moat, I have done it eating cheese, I have done it like a regular sleaze. But all right. Tonight we are going to see if I can do it while drunk, which is going to be pretty entertaining and probably fairly accurate because I feel like I could do this in about any state of consciousness at this point. So welcome along. I have started with this cup that was about half full of caramel vodka plus apple cider, which was delicious. And I'm starting to feel it now. So I promised this would be the Drunk History edition. It's going to be very entertaining. You can go back and find other times when I have done this if you want something a little bit more serious than this. This is also why I normally stick with older things, because this is not going to be the most respectful talk that I've ever given. I'm always a little bit snarky. That's why I stick with stuff from before 1940. This way everybody's dead. But all right. Timothy has done it in a tree and done it while they pee. It's not easy, but you can do it. All right. So first of all, I'm going to give a quick recap of the career of H.H. Holmes. This is an article from the Chicago Tribune, March 31st, 1893, hid in secret rooms where dealers discover their missing furniture. Mr. Holmes purchases it, takes it to his World's Fair Hotel on 63rd Street, and neglects to settle. This is what Holmes had been doing. This was a guy who had come to Chicago about 7 years before this, worked in a pharmacy for a while, then built a 2-story building, retail on one floor, apartments on the next. But now he had added a 3rd floor onto it that he said was going to be a hotel for the upcoming World's Fair. He bought a lot of stuff on credit to outfit that hotel, but never actually used any of it. He just sold it for cash and pretended he had never bought it on credit. Dodged the bills, got sued an awful lot. You'll notice March 31st, this is before the World's Fair even started. There is really very little evidence that the building ever functioned as a hotel during the World's Fair, and abundant evidence, in fact, that it did not. It was kind of a mistake that came up in a lot of the press that got repeated by Herbert Asbury, that got repeated by everybody else since. So this is H.H. Holmes, the man, the myth, the mustache. You could always tell if you ever see his ghost, you'll know it's him by the hat. And this is the building that we now call the Murder Castle. We don't really know exactly what it looked like in its prime. This is a version of it that was taken in 1895 when Holmes had been out of it for a good year and a half. At the top of it there, you see, it kind of looks so weird on the top. That is a temporary roof that was set up to replace a burned one. Because in August of 1893, the building caught fire. Even though it was the middle of the fair, there was really pretty much nobody in the building other than long-term residents and employees. And also, strangely enough, Holmes had just taken out several fire insurance policies on it. So he spent a little while hiding out from the authorities, went to Texas for a while, went to St. Louis for a while, went to Philadelphia and faked his best friend's death. And this is where they got him in trouble. The insurance company put 2 and 2 together. They remembered articles like this one saying, hey, this guy had a building full of hidden rooms and secret passages. So he was arrested on the suspicion of having faked the death of a guy by the name of Benjamin Peitzel. But he had been traveling around for a while with Peitzel's daughters and one of his sons, 2 of his daughters, one of his sons. He had other kids who weren't present at the time. But eventually the girls were found buried in the cellar of a place that Holmes had been renting in Toronto. And at this point, everybody remembered, hey, this guy had a building back in Chicago that was full of hidden rooms and secret passages. Let's get inside of that place. The New York World published this diagram a couple of months into the investigation. This is a diagram in which they kind of conflated the second and third floor and mixed stuff that was actually noted in the plays with stuff that kind of came out of their imagination. Asphyxiation chamber, the death shaft, the hanging secret chamber, the dark room, the blind room, the trapdoor leading to the secret chamber, the sealed room, the room of the three corpses, the black closet, the dummy elevator for lowering bodies, the secret room, the mysterious closed door room. Again, some of this is stuff that was found by the authorities. Some of it was stuff that they just came up with out of their own imagination. Some of it was stuff that had already been debunked. The room of the three corpses is where Myron Chappell told them he had bought 3 corpses from Holmes to turn into skeletons. That guy's story had completely fallen apart by the time the New York World published this thing. Oh yes, and of course, the hall. Enter the halls of medicine. So, my research for this takes me to places like the microfilm room, where at least 8 out of 10 microfiche readers are broken at any given time. This is the old microfilm room at the Harold Washington Library here in Chicago. They've since moved it to a different floor and made it an awful lot smaller and a lot less fun. But digging around in here, you could find many different articles on Holmes. Some of these papers have been digitized now, but there's still a few you have to go on microfilm for. The Chicago Daily News was publishing this article called Laughing at Police. A couple of weeks into the investigation, the newspapers realized, the police have been talking a lot. They ain't really finding anything. But there's also the legal archives. At the legal archives, they have these microfilm indexes of all of the lawsuits, all of the probate files. You can see here Holmes is being sued by several different people. Frederick Schultz, that was a mattress company. French and Potter, a crockery company. E. Smith, I don't know what E. Smith was. I forget anyway. I think it was just an investor. But what you do is you write down the number of the cases of the legal archives, and a few weeks later you come back and they bring you all of the stuff. Boxes and boxes of crumbling old Victorian paperwork. Rodney, no, these were not Hearst papers. At the time, Hearst only had one paper, and it was in San Francisco, and his coverage of Holmes was a little better illustrated, but otherwise not much different from other provincial papers. He didn't start expanding until pretty late in the Holmes case, and frankly, his headlines weren't that much wilder than anybody else's at the time. But this is what they bring you. This crumbling old Victorian paperwork. There's Holmes versus Wakesell. That was like a barbershop case. Holmes versus Van Schack. They were drugstore suppliers. Holmes versus Schultz is in there, but that was under Campbell. They were suing H.S. Campbell, one of his aliases. And then you open these things up and you see stuff like this. It takes a while to decipher this stuff. You have to really kind of go through a letter at a time with some of these. Some people had better handwriting than others, just like now. But then you also find things like the diagram of the first floor front of the castle building, which helps us establish what the actual dimensions of it were, because a lot of newspapers published vivid descriptions, but they didn't really agree on the details. Here we can see that it was going to be 45 feet wide. It was really not that big of a building. And also you'll find things like this note signed by Minnie Williams, one of his victims. Or this thing which has Harry H. Holmes, that's HH Holmes himself. You can see Lucy T. Belknap, that's his mother-in-law, who was officially the owner of some of his buildings. He tended to put things in other people's names. It was just good business. Here you can find a thing of establishing how much the people who worked on building it were paid, which was not great. The trouble is, you always hear that Holmes never paid any of the workers. He did pay the workers. Well, the workers got paid by their bosses. Holmes was supposed to be paying the boss. That's who didn't get paid. And this is the New York Journal. Now, this was a Hearst paper. Lived a monster, died a mystery. This is, they only had the bound volumes of this at the Library of Congress. They didn't even have, the microfilm version of that one. So that was very interesting to see. So, going through all of the microfilm stuff, all of the legal archive stuff, I was able to put together at least a more realistic timeline of what we know and what we don't about this guy. So we'll go back to his childhood a little bit. Holmes was born in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. Most of what we know about his time in Gilmanton really comes from interviews with neighbors where they inevitably said stuff like he was mostly quiet and sort of kept to himself. But also, Holmes eventually wrote a memoir called Holmes' Own Story. The open lines with like, "Come with me, if you will," and utter crap. Now, we don't know exactly how much of it is really in his writing. There's abundant evidence that it was punched up considerably by the editors, and it practically would have had to be, because Holmes was not the most quotable guy on his own. When he was 17, he married Clara Lovering. She and their son Robert went with him to Ann Arbor, where he studied at the University of Michigan, having studied under Dr. Nahum White back here in New Hampshire. Clara left while he was still in school. Neighbors said that they would see her walking around with black eyes. Eventually, she got fed up and left, only saw him a few more times after that. This is Myrta, the wife that he married next. He met her in Minnesota. She was engaged to some other guy who kind of vanishes from the record, but the story there just never had legs. Nobody ever really looked into what happened to that guy. But Myrta was working in a music store or something. Holmes met her, married her, took her to Chicago, and had a baby with her named Lucy a couple of years later. Now, only one photo of Myrta survives. Well, we can move over to this here. I think this is the only photo ever. And this is about as good as it looks, too. She spent her later years as a rural route principal of schools in Minnesota. But meanwhile, Holmes was still officially married to Clara. He tried to take out a divorce record on her, and he actually specifically named names of people that she was sleeping with at the time who don't appear to have been real people, if I remember right. Down at the bottom, you can see his signature. He was still signing under his real name, Herman W. Mudgett. Wharton Plummer, the solicitor, would represent him under his own name several times hereafter. Sleazy guy, that Wharton Plummer fella. Myrta. Eventually in 1893, he built a house for Myrta up in the north suburbs. Officially, it was owned by his girlfriend, Minnie Williams, but she didn't know that at the time. Lucy, the daughter, there must have been this photograph of her at one point that was probably the basis for this drawing. One of the cool things about researching Holmes, and one of the frustrating things, is it takes place in this narrow sliver of time when newspapers had gotten a lot better at doing drawings cheaply and quickly. So you saw much more illustrations in papers than you had 10 years before, but they hadn't quite gotten to photographs yet. There'd been some experiments with them, but you wouldn't see them regularly for a couple more years, and they wouldn't be all over the paper for another 5 or 10 years. If this had all happened 10 years later, we would have pictures of everybody. We would have pictures of every piece of evidence. We would have far more than just the 3 or 4 pictures of HH Holmes that we have. Here's Lucy when she was older, long after Holmes was dead. And here she is in her passport application. She eventually had a wedding at the Fine Arts Building here in Chicago. She too became a teacher, while her mother was advocating for spelling reform. And this is Myrta much later. This is apparently a drawing of his mother-in-law, Lucy Belknap, who shows up in the stories quite a lot, but never really got as much attention in the press. But Holmes was working at first when he got to Chicago for Dr. Holton, who was always portrayed in graphic novels and things as an old hapless lady. Really, Dr. Holton was a young woman named Dr. E.S. Holton. Her husband was not some old doctor dying of cancer. He was some guy who had a job on the railway. Holmes is generally said to have killed the two of them, but they were okay, at least for a while. I mean, nobody who was alive in 1886 is still particularly okay nowadays. Switching from the caramel apple cider to the bourbon is a switch. Well, there's Dr. E.S. Holton, lived well into the 20th century. Here's this handsome fellow with their graves, and his Ned Flanders is the devil t-shirt. Supposed to look really cool back in the late period of my young adult author period. My young adult author era. This is the Eras Tour. Here we go. Gangs of Chicago. Gangs of Chicago was the one that first told the story that Dr. E.S. Holton was an old man dying of cancer while his poor wife tried to run things herself. She wasn't anywhere near 60 years old. She was only a couple of years older than Holmes was. The doctor was the woman. I had more hair then, didn't I? This always depresses me. But all right. So, it was while Holmes was working in that pharmacy. He did buy the pharmacy from Dr. and Mrs. Holton. and he did do some kind of underhanded stuff to get it, but it never made the legal archives as far as I could ever tell. Believe me, I sure looked for a Holton lawsuit. Didn't find one. But it was while he was working there that he found his one true love, which was buying stuff on credit and then not paying for it. I'd be making a lot more money at these things if I said his one true love was killing people. But one can't have everything. So this is the lawsuit from when he stole a bunch of barbershop equipment. But he had only been working there for a few months when he bought the land across the street in early 1887 to build a building that we now call the Castle Building. We can trace the dates when it was built pretty well. The construction began in the summer of 1887. Here's a promissory note that he signed, good for $5. He built a lot of things based on promissory notes. Now, at the time, he was represented in court by a guy by the name of Edward Maher, who randomly popped up in a Johann Hawk story, too. Incidentally, I got a line on a Johann Hawk publisher, but they want me to keep it under 40,000 words, and that just can't really happen. Self-defeating once again. But this is the building that he built as it appeared in 1893. That third floor, 1895, it's got the temporary roof on there. But it was initially a two-story building. They added a third one eventually. But this ended up buried in lawsuits between the construction company, the various lenders, the various investors. It's common to hear that Holmes designed the entire thing himself so that nobody else knew what was in it, did it all with his own stolen money. There were a lot of investors. There were a lot of people who had a claim on this place. In fact, they eventually had to try to summon everybody. This is page 1 of 3 on a summons for this thing. Some of whom I couldn't find out that much about. But it does include Julia Connor, who was dead by the time this thing came out. And one thing I love is that you can tell that whatever clerk had to do this had done it before, because up at the top it says, "We command you to summon," and the poor clerk has written in "again" in pencil. Again. But here we go. So, this brings us to 1888. I've just been talking about 1887. We might as well cover 1888 because even last night when I mentioned Holmes on the zoo tour, the first question was, aren't people saying that he went to London to be Jack the Ripper? The Jack the Ripper murders took place in the fall of 1888. October 9th, 1888, HH Holmes was in Chicago registering to vote. Around that late September, and mid-October, he was replying to things in the lawsuit with Ed Iron and Steel, the company that had built the Castle Building. And several years later, it was mentioned that in November of 1888, he went back to New Hampshire and visited his old original family. This is why he registered to vote, but didn't ever end up actually doing the voting, because he was out of town at the time. So evidence is fairly abundant. I know of no evidence that the guy was ever in London. Evidence is pretty clear that he was in Chicago as of fall of 1888. But if you're trying to fill 8 episodes of a TV show, you do what you gotta do. Maybe tonight I'll get drunk enough to read you the text I was getting from the History Channel. Right around the time my H.H. Holmes book came out and the time that the TV show was coming out, they're like, "You're on thin ice, Seltzer. You'll never work in this town again." Well, been right so far. He still could have been the Ripper, but we got to go into replaced by a double kind of crap here. So, 1887, some people moved into the Castle Building. Ned Connor, a jeweler. Julia Connor, his wife who wanted to live in the big city. And their daughter Pearl. Holmes began having an affair with Julie. Ned knew all about it, and eventually Holmes would even kind of brag about it. One time when he was talking about Julie with Ned, he mentioned something about her that he would only have known if he had been sleeping with her. We have to use our imaginations on this, and speaking of that, it's about time I did another After Hours tour, isn't it? Yeah, we'll do another After Hours tour one of these days. But Ned moved out, but Holmes kept on bumping into him to bug him about various swindles and schemes. Julia carried on an affair with Holmes for nearly 2 years. But then she and Pearl both disappeared Christmas of 1891. Holmes would later say that she got pregnant and died during an abortion. Julia, not Pearl. He never said what happened to Pearl. But Pearl ended up working for him at the ABC Copier Company. This is the patent drawing for the ABC copier machine. Looks very impressive. And there was also, Ned's sister Gertrude is also sometimes said to have been a victim. About 6 weeks after she went back to Iowa, she died. About 7 weeks. And in some versions of the story, she got home and died almost immediately because Holmes had given her some poison or something. But this is one point where the story that Holmes might have killed her was circulating in 1895, and Ned was just so insistent. No, she had not had an affair with Holmes. She had not been ruined by that man. We can prove that she died pure. They had a doctor's note saying that she died of a heart failure. But they were just so insistent that she had never slept with HH Holmes, voluntarily or not, that it almost makes you wonder. It seems like they protest too much. Holmes was accused of killing her even by one of his friends. After they found out that she was dead, the friend said, "Holmes, you have killed her." And he turned off in that suave way of his, saying with the utmost sang-froid, "Bah, what makes you say that?" Bum, bum, bum. Holmes claimed that he had been having an affair with her. Another one that he was likely having an affair with was a woman named Emmeline Cigrand in 1892. There is not a known photograph of Emmeline Cigrand. There are just a lot of drawings of her. This is a photograph that kind of looks right, was in a box of stuff supposedly related to Holmes, and was taken at a building that I can trace her to. Still not quite enough to go on, but this might be Emmeline Cigrand. It really might. She had previously been working in Dwight, Illinois at the Keeley Institute to cure alcoholism. Apparently was let go because she was just too much of a dreamer. We do know from her letters, she would like at the end of her letters, she would not just say, "Sincerely, Emmeline." She would say, "Lives of great men all remind us that we can make our lives sublime, and in passing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. Sincerely, Emmeline." Very dramatic young woman. The impression I get is that she knew Holmes was married. She's still married to Murda at the time, but thought that his wife was dying, and as soon as she was out of the way, the two of them would get a nice big house together on Hoyne Street. So she told a lot of her friends she was engaged, but always gave a different name for the guy. Sometimes he was Mr. Belknap, sometimes he was Mr. Campbell or something. Now, it was while she was working there that Holmes took on the persona of H.S. Campbell. H.S. Campbell was not a real person, but H.S. Campbell wrote a lot of these letters saying, "Hey, please to give this Holmes guy all of your stuff on credit. I own this building at 701 63rd, so tell you what, I'll pay you." And this was to outfit the building as a World's Fair hotel. He was going to add a third floor and make that a hotel space. But really, I think it was never intended to be open for business. It was a good opportunity to swindle investors, to swindle suppliers. Everybody was planning to get rich off of the World's Fair. Just like 1995 Atlanta, everybody had a plan for how to get rich off of the Olympics. Trust me. So this kind of counted as well as a credit card. Down below, you can see in Holmes' handwriting, bills should be addressed to H.H. Holmes, 701 63rd. There's also an address in Philadelphia written on the side, which turned out to be a fruit and fireworks company. But Emmeline was there when they added the third floor onto the building that was supposed to be the hotel space. She was visited while she was there by her cousin, Dr. B.J. Cigrand, who wrote this page-turner of a book, The Rise, Fall, and Revival of Dental Prosthesis. Page-turner, I'm telling you. Dr. B.J. Cigrand also ended up figuring in the Lutgert Sausage Factory murder and is generally known as the father of Flag Day. He's like the Forrest Gump of crime and patriotism. Minnie disappeared December of 1892. Her place was taken by Minnie Williams, who was a failed actress who came to Chicago looking to get a real job finally. And her sister Nanny, her long-lost sister, they'd been raised apart and barely remembered that they had a sister out there someplace when they were reunited at a judge's house. Minnie moved to Chicago in early 1893, maybe late 1892. First notice we have of her is January of 93, living up on Roslyn Place. Really cool building that still stands. She had been an actress. We know there were more photographs of her than just this one. The pearl necklace turned up in a lot of things. I said pearl necklace. It's even this early picture of her. Now, Minnie is one person that I really can't get my head around. There were even headlines at the time. She dealt in mystery. She seems very different from the other people who were involved in this. Holmes at sometimes was described as seeming like he was afraid of her. The impression I get is she thought she was using Holmes to get his money to relaunch her theatrical career. People who knew her in college said that she was a man-hater. This is possibly a photograph of her. I found this at a college program in Boston that she appeared in. This is a character doing a tableau portraying the emotion of envy. Minnie was at this. It kind of looks like her, but I don't have enough more to go on than that. The two of them were represented in court after their deaths by a guy named William Capa, who just rolled into Chicago and made a complete ass of himself in 1895. The Williams sisters having vanished in 1893. Shortly after they vanished, the building caught fire. Holmes had taken out several fire insurance policies on the place. The fire insurance companies were not fooled for a second, so Holmes spent the fall of 1893 just kind of dodging the insurance companies, staying away from the building. Then, in January of 1894, he went to Denver to pick up some money that was owed to Minnie Williams by a mining company after the accidental death of her brother in the Arkansas Valley smelter. How'd you like to work in a smelter? Hey, Cassidy, how you doing? We're drinking about pearl necklaces here. Cassidy's my sister, everybody. I'm doing the Drunk HH Holmes tour. But he went out there under the name H.M. Howard with his new girlfriend, Georgiana Yoke, and while in Denver, they got married. I think Georgiana's mother insisted. Her mother is kind of a character in the book. She was always a big talker. So, this is Georgiana Yoke. I know an author who may have a photograph of her. The author Judith Nichols wrote a book called A Competent Witness, which is a novel about Georgiana that really does a pretty good job of portraying what she was probably like. It was after she wrote this that I found a couple of letters from Georgiana and found out that, she really got her voice just about right. And she was just guessing, but we could compare. I was like, yeah, it was very impressive. Judith is cool. I met Judith a couple of times. So this is another drawing of her. And Judith thinks she's got a couple of later photos. There's a group photo that probably includes Georgiana, and she thinks she knows which one she is. But it's one of those things we just can't do it. I think she did it, but I just can't prove it. Several drawings of her, all looking like the Wicked Witch of the West. This might have actually been murder. They just said Mrs. H.H. Holmes. That could mean about anyone. But he went to... She knew that he went by different names, also by O.C. Pratt and H.M. Howard and H.H. Holmes. But he had a good explanation for all of them. They all sound very far-fetched now, but when you see someone through rose-colored glasses, all of the red flags just look like flags. So saith the owl in BoJack Horseman. So, after a brief stint in Denver, they went down to Texas to build on some land that had strangely been transferred from Minnie Williams to H.H. Holmes for only $1. And he was down there in Texas with his friend Benjamin Peitzel. Peitzel he had probably met when they both had offices in the Chemical Bank building downtown, and found out that they had a shared love for dishonest business practices. Fall of 1893, Peitzel was a much more famous criminal. He'd been caught in this major check cashing scheme in Terre Haute, Indiana. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, Terre Haute, but whatever. But when the ABC Copier Company was sold off at auction, Benjamin Peitzel made the high bid, but didn't end up buying it. Maybe he was the low one. But apparently he and Holmes also, in the summer of 1894, got into some scheme down in Oxford, Mississippi, where they killed a guy. We only know this because apparently Myrtle Holmes went and gave an affidavit to a guy named Yehu Amaziah Orr, who would later become famous as the last survivor of the Confederate Congress, which to me indicates that he is not a trustworthy character. Fuck this guy. We won't even get into his views on why the South seceded, which was exactly what you'd think. It wasn't state rights. But down in Fort Worth, on Minnie's property, they built a whole other castle building. This was very similar looking, really, to the one he had back in Chicago, only bigger. And once again, it was built by buying stuff on credit and not paying for it. One newspaper reporter who toured the place said that if this was the old days, it would be known as the Castle of Many Doors. I bet they could find a better name for it than that. But apparently there were a lot of doors on the inside of this place and a lot of interior rooms, kind of twisting and snaking, like they hadn't put any thought at all into the idea that anybody might ever actually go inside of this building. They were just building it to sell it for the insurance money. And that's pretty much what happened. People in Texas figured this out way faster than people in Chicago did, especially after he got involved in horse swindles. So he fled Texas, went to St. Louis, where he swindled the Hennessy Cognac Company. Holmes would later say he did not object to certain light wines, but did not use alcohol himself, but he did swindle Hennessy Cognac. He was very quickly arrested in St. Louis for trying to start a drugstore entirely on borrowed stuff that he planned to sell for cash. But he was in prison along with Marion Hedgepeth, the train robber. Now, Holmes had been kind of living out a Jesse James fantasy. He was calling himself Mr. Howard, Jesse James's old nickname. He was using false names and getting involved in horse swindles. Marion Hedgepeth had robbed the Glendale train, the same train that Jesse James robbed. Holmes was utterly starstruck, and he told him, hey, I got this plan. My friend Ben and I were going to go to Philadelphia and fake his death for the insurance money this September. If we get enough money, you want us to use it to get you out of jail, you can go to Europe with us? And Marion was like, we'll see, kid. We'll see. You're on your own, kid. You always have been. So, that September, having gotten sprung from jail in St. Louis, Holmes went to Philadelphia, where he murdered Benjamin Peitzel. He might have been planning to fake his death for the insurance money at some point along the line, but one way or another, he decided the easiest thing was just to kill him properly. So he was killed and buried in a shallow grave in a potter's field in Mechanicsville, Pennsylvania. Holmes then wrote to the insurance company and said, hey, this B.F. Perry guy, that's actually Ben Peitzel. He's insured under this policy number. I'll come identify the body. You can give me the money. I'll give it to the widow. He kept most of that money for himself, of course, and then started traveling around with 3 of Benjamin Peitzel's kids. They were no longer in his custody when they captured him. They put 2 and 2 together. They got a letter from Marion Hedgepeth, the train robber, Mr. Faust, I think the guy's name was. I don't talk about him too much. But he was a detective for the insurance company. The insurance company employed many such type people. They put 2 and 2 together, got the Pinkertons involved, arrested him in Boston, and initially arrested him just as a swindler. But this was a 9 days news story. Everybody was like, wow, this guy tricked the insurance companies out of $10,000. That is very impressive. And hey, didn't he also have this building in Chicago that was supposed to be full of hidden secret rooms and secret passages, etc., a couple of years ago? Don't you think we ought to investigate that? And they decided, nah, whatever. Spring of 1895, he was put on trial just for insurance fraud and pled guilty. He was like, yep, I'm a big insurance fraudster. Definitely faked that guy's death. Then he changed his story a bit and said, no, he didn't fake his death. It was a suicide. I just made it look like an accident so the poor family would get the insurance money. Well, he was convicted of insurance fraud, and George Graham, the state's attorney, the district attorney for the Commonwealth, brought him in and said, okay, so Holmes, where's the kids? And Holmes said, oh, they're with Minnie Williams in London. Here's a secret code you can put in a London newspaper. Like R equals A, E equals B, P equals C, etc. The Herald, you were always putting secret coded message in the New York Herald, which is a really wretched newspaper from New York. Way worse than any Holmes Hearst paper ever was, honestly. But you'd see things like, letter amethyst, letter at old place. Commodore, Kane expressed, elevation to show Wednesday. Come, then all will be forgiven. Fat architect. It's all meant something to somebody. But here's an ad that was placed for Minnie Williams that he thought told George Graham that she might see, even though she was in London with the kids, alive and well. This basically just said, please contact Massey. Please let everybody know that you're still alive and not dead because they think I killed you. But nobody quite bought this. Many, of course, never responded to this, so a detective, Frank Geyer, who I ended up being kind of unimpressed with, honestly, but eventually found the Peitzel girls, Alice and Nellie, Ben's daughters who had been traveling with Holmes, buried in a shallow grave underneath a rental property in Toronto. And Holmes would later say, listen, I'm supposed to be a criminal mastermind, right? Do you really think a criminal mastermind would have buried bodies in the basement of a rental property and not expected to be caught right away? It's kind of a fair point, really. That's a fair question, Betty. Go back to Charlie's aunt. It said, Charlie's aunt, do not neglect me longer. Please call soon, won't you? Agnes. Don't worry, Grandma, I've got it all under control. All right. But once they found these bodies, everybody realized this building back in Chicago was probably full of some really freaky stuff. This is the Chicago Mail's drawing of the crowd gathered around the castle. Here's an actual photograph of the crowd gathered around the castle, one of only 2 photographs from that era. This one emerged a little bit more recently. And on the side, you can see the mysterious bay window, which actually had a view of the secret passages. And a drawing of the inside of the drugstore, probably based on a photograph. You can imagine a photograph looking like this. But I've never seen the proper one. So this is a more accurate drawing by the Chicago Times-Herald, which made a proper one with rooms with lurid names like Rear Hallway. It said rear. A lot of the digging went on in the basement, but this was not exactly a professional investigation. The police just let reporters walk around and touch everything and do some of the digging for themselves. The basement is widely reported now to have been full of torture equipment, like a medieval rack that Holmes was using to create a race of giants. Really, it was just an unfinished basement. There was kind of a labyrinth of rooms. The place had been built kind of crappily. I've tried to recreate, the Times-Herald published this tiny map of the basement. There was a hidden chamber down there. There was a shaft down there. I said shaft. There was a destroyed furnace, another furnace, some stairs, and a coal bin. Terrifying. Another map was in the Chicago Chronicle, which shows dotted lines where the Not Me demon ran around, fucking up the life of the family circus, where the bones were found. They did find a couple of skeletons down here. Most of the stuff they found turned out to be soup bones, but a couple of human bones were reportedly discovered. We don't really know how accurate any of this was because we were operating under the leadership of Chief John J. Badenoch, who has just been made chief of police for entirely political reasons. He had no experience in cop work or legal work or forensics or anything, or any idea what the hell he was doing. He was assisted by Detective Sergeant John W. Norton, who would go on to have a long and illustrious career with the cops, but was still right at the start of it here. And Inspector Fitzpatrick, who had previously been involved in shooting at Haymarket protesters. They did find a mysterious tank in the back and initially thought this is full of some sort of deadly gas. I was like, well, yeah, it turned out to be like gasoline. It was just the regular, ordinary gas. For a while, they were saying he must have been cremating people here in this wood-burning stove, until people pointed out, no, you really couldn't cremate somebody in a wood-burning stove. You could try, but it would smell really bad and it wouldn't work. There was also a thing where they found a footprint on the wall of one of the vaults. Eventually, the New York World did a drawing of the footprint in the cellar, but they're mistaken here. The subhead is not really related to the headline. Footprint is found, and important discovery in the cellar refer to two different clues entirely. But newspapers were having fun with this. The Chicago Mail published headlines like "Fiendish," "Dastard," "Red stains on a rope." Red stains on a rope. But nothing ever came of any of this. Day after day, the police would announce these grand new theories of how Holmes did it, and the next day they would be debunked. So by the end of July, They were publishing articles like "Laughing at Police." So then the police said, okay, don't worry. We found the guy. We found a guy who's been buying up dead bodies from Holmes to turn them into skeletons to sell to medical schools. It was a guy named Myron Chappell. Newspapers initially reported his name as being Charles Chappell, which still turns up in Chicago in a Holmes book to this day. But the next day they found out his name was Myron Chappell. And the next day they found out that he had been a skeleton articulator years and years ago, but now was probably just a guy who would say anything the cops told him to if they pumped him full of enough whiskey. Speaking of whiskey. Yep. But one skeleton he had never finished articulating. He had kept the skull and painted it red and dangled it from a tree in his yard. Neighbors saw it. One of his neighbors who was obsessed with the Holmes case called the police and said, "There's a skull in my neighbor's yard. Do you think that might be a Holmes victim?" Police went up here and found that it hit the jackpot with this dude. It was only a couple of weeks after this the New York World published their famous article, "Castle of a Modern Bluebeard," which would be the major source for Holmes stuff. There's a paragraph in here like the list of people who had gone to Chicago for the World's Fair and never returned was a long one, and in the greater number of foul play was suspected. And talking about did they follow ads for Holmes' Castle and go to his place never to return. You'll never really find an ad for Holmes' Castle, for one thing. This was just the New York World shooting the shit, but it's been taken as fact ever since then. But here we go. Sherry asked, did Rush Medical School buy his skeletons? It's possible. It wouldn't have been the Holmes skeletons. He was only really operating well before the Holmes got to Chicago. The Holmes. Rush always seemed to be able to get all the dead bodies they needed. They were like the rich kids' camp across the lake of medical schools in those days. But while the investigation was going on, in fact, the same day the Chicago Tribune reprinted that article from the New York World, the place burned. And it didn't burn down to the ground, as is generally said. They had to rebuild part of it. But it was still there. This is a picture of it from about 1908. And this common picture of it is from 1938, right before it was torn down. You can see there's like automobiles nearby it. But it was torn down in 1938. The Englewood Post Office occupies part of the space. But over on the left would have been most of the space. Most of it is where these trees are now. You can kind of line up the two. The blue lines there are the castle. The green ones are the post office. The post orifice. So it would kind of look like this if they were both here at the same time. And I have been down in the basement a couple of times. This is me trying to look as spooky as possible. This was the second time I went down there when nothing happened. But the first time I did have an audio recorder running, started whispering the names of the people I thought were most likely to have been killed there. Emmeline, Julia, and Pearl. Really, Emmeline probably wouldn't have been killed there. Holmes was fairly consistent in saying she died during an abortion. They probably would have gone off-site for that. But Julia and Pearl, there's abundant reason to believe that some of the bones that they found really were the bones of a woman and a young girl. Because Holmes had a whole explanation for why there would be such a thing. So I started whispering these names, and when I play the recording back, I'll just play you the tape. Roll tape. Computer, run file. Did that play? Kind of looks like it didn't play. Where did it go? I'll put it in again. I gotta find it here someplace. Computer run file. That's literally what it's under. Here we go. Julia and Pearl. Anybody we don't even know about. Come on. I'll play that again. It sounds to me like she is saying sorry, beefalo, as I've often said. Dun dun dun. Hey, where did it go now? There we go. There you go. N-E-W, though. That's a good explanation. Why do I look so old in that picture? I don't know, Lynn. I'm like 10 years younger than I am right now. I mean, not that much younger. 7 or 8. You know. This is because I didn't have these awesome glasses yet. Bob Dylan's drummer now has the same glasses. That's just how cool I am. All right, so Holmes was eventually found guilty of just the one murder. Just the murder of Benjamin Peitzel. He later confessed to 27 of them. But many of them were people who were still alive. Others seem to have been fictional characters. The actual number we can land at is about 9 that we can say for sure. Then a couple of maybes beyond that, such as a woman named Anna Betts, who lived nearby, died of apoplexy, and Holmes was convinced that the newspapers had been accusing him of her murder. I've never found the newspaper saying as much, so it's kind of suspicious that he assumed that they were. And also, Gertrude Connor is, I think, more of a possibility than is sometimes said to be. But he was paid an awful lot of money to write this confession. The New York World had already announced that he was going to be confessing to 20 murders, so if he only confessed to 20, it would have been a letdown. He had to jump it up a little bit to keep the price up. But before he was even dead, there was talk of a curse. The baleful influences of Holmes's evil eye. This is what Carolyn Weatherall, a reporter for the New York World, who had interviewed Holmes in prison, but didn't manage to secure the confession, and kind of in revenge wrote these articles about Holmes' evil eye. That people connected to the case were dying horrible deaths. Now it's true, like one of the guys on the jury had been electrocuted. George Green, the district attorney, had lost an election for president of the Union League. Terror. And really, the story of the Holmes curse, though, would go for a long time. People connected to the case often came to no good end. Electrocution, suicide, etc. And this is part of why the story survived, because every time somebody from the case died, they had to rehash the story of the Holmes curse. But May 1895, Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia in front of a great number of witnesses. He had a hood on when they hanged him, but not when they first brought him out. And having a hood on when you were hanged was totally common. But through his own request, he was buried in a giant block of cement. They put him in the receiving vault first with all the cement in the coffin, so it took an awful lot of people to haul the thing out. Going heave ho, like in Winnie the Pooh. I don't remember why they were singing heave ho in Winnie the Pooh. Is that when Pooh got his butt stuck in the tree? I could tell you a story about that, but I won't. But he was buried in Philadelphia in a massive grave full of cement. It's kind of a trend at the time that they were worried that people would get their bodies stolen, so they were filling coffins with cement. 1898, in fact, there was a rumor that Holmes is not really hanged. That it had really hanged some other guy with a mustache and had just propped him up ahead of time like Weekend at Bernie's. Whoever wrote this had no idea, had never read a first-hand account of the hanging. There were about 100 witnesses to it, many of whom knew Holmes pretty well and hated his guts. But this particular one was probably created by a guy named A.J. Warner, whom Holmes had previously claimed to have murdered in a glass-bending oven, but was in fact alive and well. The story was debunked almost immediately, but was used about 120 years later, to get the body exhumed. Here's how he looks and all of that stuff. One thing that didn't turn up on the TV show about this, but I've been asking them about, I had to find out independently, was they did find the cross that Holmes' priests had put in. Whether Holmes ever actually converted to Catholicism or not is kind of debated, but he definitely had priests and spiritual advisors in prison, one of whom bought him this, and also one of whom died a terrible death not long afterwards. But here is the skeleton all dressed up for a night in the town. A couple of doctors portrayed Holmes while he was there. Here he is with a lampshade on his head, undergoing the chemographian by Dr. McDonald, which is classic Victorian pseudoscience. Where did he get these wonderful toys? The hand grip meter, the palletometer, the craniometer, the thermosthetometer, the esthiometer, the temple algometer, the palm algometer. Don't you wish you had a palm algometer for your very own? But also, Dr. Eugene Talbot published a report with his jaw cast. So when they dug up this skull, it was really cool. You could, in fact, match it pretty well. But one thing that I always close on, drunk or not, the thing that I can't really top, is in Dr. Talbot's report, he did happen to mention, bottom of the first paragraph there, sexual organs, unusually small. One more piece of the puzzle. I'm going to have a beer, everybody, so welcome along. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. I drank way more tonight than I normally ever do. Upcoming stuff, well, that's tonight, Drunk HH Holmes, but October 21st, fully sober, I will be doing Graceland Cemetery tours at 11:30 and 2 o'clock. Sunday the 22nd, we're at Rose Hill, October 28th, even though they just jacked up the price on me considerably. We'll be doing a bus tour, on a ghost tour bus. So, all right, everyone. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. With that, I will put this up and go get myself a nice Hair of the Dog beer. Thanks to the Mysterians who've been bringing me this New Glarus Company beer. And thanks, everybody. I will put the Benny back on. Hold on while I go get myself a drink.
Goodman's arrangement of the Bugle Call Rag.
Holmes' connection to Oxford. He went down to Mississippi and was rumored to have killed a guy who was first reported under the name George Thomas, but later clarified as Thomas Gregson. Details are sketchy. I've got some of the papers from the Yehu Amaziah Orr papers, but it doesn't really clear stuff up much. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Joanne. And thank you, Mona. Raspberry tart, good idea, but I don't have those in the fridge, so what am I to do? I've only got the Enigma in the fridge. Laura, the bus tour starts outside of the Rock and Roll McDonald's. Hey, Subway J. I do rock. A little. Maybe a little. Maybe I should not get a beer. In fact, no. I'm just going to have some water. Those whole last couple of slides, I was thinking, come on, I'm not drunk at all. Then I moved, and I'm like, oh, yeah. But once I don't have built-in stuff to talk about, nope. All the hits except Tapeworm and the Devil Baby. Well, Thursday night, next Thursday, I haven't figured out what we're going to do for the virtual tour yet. I got to figure that out tomorrow, but I'm going to be doing a talk at Hull House. No, I haven't got the new boo bucket, Karen. Cup of coffee, Nancy. You want me to go to sleep or what? Ooh, Sick Fisher at a liquor store. I gotta see that. I could go make some decaf, maybe. I got some decaf. Did I add more bats? Yeah, there's some more bats than there were previously. It's the Halloween setup there. Where are the podcasts visible? I don't know right now. I haven't had a podcast in a while, but new ones are coming. There's a whole new podcast coming. How dry I am, Gene. How dry I am. How wet I'll be if I don't find the bathroom key. Stranded on the toilet bowl. Aviva, everything from that bus tour that had to get canceled has been refunded. Check your whatever email you use to sign up for it in the first place. They have all been refunded. I'm a little disturbed that I've heard from a couple of people now who didn't know that. The emails went out, the refunds went out. Thank you, Crystal. And I tried to add another email, but it won't let me. I'll try something else. I'll try another strategy later. Thank you, Diane. See you in the morning, Cindy. I don't know what I'm going to do in the morning. I don't have my car. Rosell's walking distance. Now, Joanne, what happened was the bus company had been, like, stringing me along on confirming. And then now they decided, no, we can't do it after all. So I have to go to another bus company, and that is jacking up the rates. But yeah, the 10 p.m. bus tour on the 28th is canceled, and the 21st tour is canceled. There are only a few people that signed up for it, but you should have all gotten emails about it. I'll have to go through again tomorrow and figure something out. Yeah, Kristen, that's probably what I'll be doing tomorrow. So I feel like I should call in sick over understudy coffee. They always worry when I don't show up. Now, Catherine, they're always expensive. I'm not paying that much more, I don't think, than I normally did. But yeah, the thing's just not really selling. As of right now, I have not broken even. Yes, as of right now, the 7 p.m. on the 28th is still on. I got a line on a couple of other bus companies. I can't do it for a reasonable rate, but we're going to do it. I'm determined we're going to do it.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it. Trucking.
Yes, the 7 p.m. on the 28th is still on. But bus companies are being weird with me. I don't think I'm still blacklisted, am I? I know Ursula Bielski had me blacklisted when I first started doing tours for myself. I had a hard time finding a bus company that would take me because everybody else had been, like, warned not to. Susan, that is true. We could find a grave in New York City virtually. Hey, new Rolling Stones album out in 2 hours. And I'll be in New York in under a month. But not on a Friday. I don't usually bash Ursula by name, but I don't know, after her rants about her problems with trans kids and immigrants and stuff, I should just bash her all I feel like. Nicole, they blacklisted me because I had worked for Chicago Awnings for a number of years, and then they wouldn't give me a raise. I finally told her, look, I need to be making more than, like, this fraction of a percent. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go out on my own. They said, well, go out on your own then. And then they tried to blacklist me. They called all the bus companies and said, if you book, like, this name, this name, this name, or this name, or this name, we'll pull all our business. And they were pulling in a lot of business. It's just business. Marie, that's very interesting. I don't know, if she spent a long time just bashing me every chance she got. But I think it's cooled down a little bit now. She's not doing as much in the field. I'm not doing as much ghost stuff either. Oh, Amy, that's interesting. I've never seen John Mayer. I heard him when I hung around outside of the Dead concert. And when they walked into the arena, he walked right by me in the stadium. Now, Debbie, this is not the kind of business where rival companies get together to play softball. I think it should be. I mean, just last weekend at Graceland, I met one of the women who runs who's a big deal in the Chicago architecture community, who used to just hate my guts. She thought I was this Gen Z upstart kid. But now we had a pleasant chat and we got a selfie, and she was like, "Oh, look, I'm schmoozing with the competition." I love her to bits. She reminds me of an Arrested Development character. Aviva, she's not with the company anymore, so it wouldn't help any. I was not at the Dead concerts. I was just hanging around outside. I felt like I don't need to pay $100 to see 2 of the Grateful Dead with John Mayer. Nicole, that sounds right. This is why I almost never kick people off of my walking tours. I don't think I ever do. Even if it ended up overbooking, everybody gets to stay. If you just show up late, if you show up at the wrong time, whatever. That's also part of why I do it. Like I hate to have to turn people away, especially when they had a legitimate booking. They just overbooked. It was stupid. It wasn't usually Ursula, it was usually Dave doing that stuff, her husband, or ex-husband, or off again, on again husband. I never kept track. Alright, I'm not as drunk. I don't feel like I didn't think I was that drunk at the end of the tour, but then I started to walk around like, oh, yes I am. Alright, I hope so, Mackenzie. Still some stuff here. Kristen, that sounds right. We'd have, especially back on the Ursula tours, we'd have a lot of drunks show up. They'd be like shouting in the back of the bus the whole time. Then we get everybody off the bus. They come back. So what happened here? Tell the story again. Debbie, that might work.
Right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago, and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing "Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo."
That's very interesting. I made it my business not to get involved in Ursula's personal life. Which is tough because she tended to overshare. And Mackenzie, you know, the suburbs aren't really that much cheaper than Chicago. In many cases, to rent, not at all cheaper. Evanston, I would say, is more expensive. I'm not near drunk enough to want to talk about. She's not involved in the business anymore. I don't need to be talking about former employers. But yeah, her political stuff is beyond the pale. I actually just talked to Amelia, who I worked with at that company, and got the brunt of it when I quit. Got all the rants about me when I quit. Came on the zoo tour the other night. We had a pleasant chat. We've always gone along. The Crosby sings it. Vibes, man, vibes. I like that. Yeah, I think Chicago Hauntings, I know Chicago Hauntings is still around. I'm just, the ghost hunting fad is kind of over these days. And I'm glad to be working more in cemeteries than the ghost stuff these days, honestly. How much was your car bill, Carol? It was $3,600. He says with a pause and gritted teeth. I'll get it back tomorrow. They tried to pull 1970s car dealership tricks on me. Problem is, I told them I only want to trade it in if you've got something that's not white, silver, red, or black. And that ended that, because it's the only 4 cars they make anymore. Yeah, I thought about maybe I'd just get a new car, but all the cars they make now are ugly. That's not even the labor. They're giving me, based on the parts, based on what I looked up, a reasonable deal. It just sucks. Chris, I'm not the kind of guy who can go around custom ordering cars. I thought about, like, Earl Scheib is out of business. I remember when we started Weird Chicago to get away from Ursula. We took the bus to Earl Scheib, who will paint your car for $99.95. He charged us about $300, I think, for the bus. Yeah, Joanne, sometimes you can find one in blue. Now and then a green. Yeah, car issues are my least favorite thing to deal with. It's why I buy Toyotas. They don't really break that much. But when they do, oh, they do. I think a lot of them, I like the lines on them. I like the designs on them. It's just like, they make more than 4 colors. There are 8 basic colors and multiple shades thereof. Chris, glad to hear that. Oh yeah, the Beatles always have great colors. So you can say red slug bug. The yellow slug bug with a green stripe that we saw at the time, that was yellow slug bug Spy. Galactic Aqua, that's interesting, Georgia. Now, they tried to email me and say, we just had a customer looking for a car exactly like yours. We'd like to make this customer happy. So if you would like to trade it in, we can offer you an incredible deal. And I said, what are we talking? They said, well, why don't we have someone show you the inventory? I'm like, no, what are we talking first of all? They wouldn't tell me what kind of deal they were offering me. And this sounds like buy a car in the 70s tricks to me. See you, Graceland, Boston on YouTube.
Forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
Kristen, my first car was a Chevy Celebrity. I do not know which celebrity would have been driving around into this thing. Maybe that person who was in Divergent. Yeah, but if I walk, I gotta get the car towed someplace else, and then it's more of a hassle. Blech. Price-wise, they're about competitive for what it needs.
We have been presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel.
Let me guess, the car you're going to try to get me to buy instead belonged to an old lady who only used it to drive to church, right? And it says 130, but that's really just a mistake.
Yep.
Sure. And for an extra $2,000, I can get it in a color that I kind of want. If I'm lucky, 2,000, yeah. Yeah, one of the worst things about adulting indeed, Tom, is why I try to avoid doing it, and is why having a Prius usually means I don't have to. But when you do, you do. Like, I got lucky, though. Look, the brakes suddenly went out while I was driving down Ravenswood alongside a whole lot of places where I could safely pull over. And I had almost gotten Ronnie where she needed to go at the time, within about a block of it. And there was a coffee shop pretty nearby while I waited for the tow truck. And yet... And also, it didn't happen on the way to a Bob Dylan concert, of which I took a few trips in the last week. Or on the way back, which wouldn't have been as bad, because at least I got to see the show. But man, if it had broken on the way to Indianapolis and I had missed Dylan covering Longest Days... Man, I would have been mad. I'm still mad about 20 years ago. I missed by one show. I missed seeing him play the song "Dignity." I was bitter for years about having to leave early because my parents could only give me a ride at a certain time and missing When I Paint My Masterpiece. But now that's an every show song. With all my heart. I was lately pressed into service watching one of my own tours. I will not relay the circumstances. It was very strange. Yeah, my brake thing, my brake booster leaked. That was the problem. Plus the brake pump went out. Ah, Jan, that sucks.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny Walk.
Maybe I should get a candy apple red gremlin. I need to get a gremlin. Susan, I wish I had stuck around to ask you how you have a date with Loki. But alright. Yeah, Timothy, one time I went to get one of the batteries in my Prius replaced because one winter day it wasn't starting up properly. There's two different batteries in it. And the smaller one apparently needed to be replaced, so I took it to a dealer and saw the dealer watching a YouTube video about how to replace it. Like, you know what? Car Talk, those guys are still on, huh? Hey, and my neighbors actually use the club on their car. Where is Miles? That is a good question. He's probably on the bed. Priya, you can see, is on the couch over there. Miles made his appearance early on, so he was put in for his contract. Let's see. Oh, the door is open. Miles, okay, there you are. Okay. Miles is hanging out on the bed. The thing I remember most about Car Talk is one person calling in and saying, "What is a Hemi? Should I be concerned if my car is not Hemi-powered?" And I said, a Hemi is a gimmick, and no, you don't need to worry if your car is not Hemi-powered. Lily is probably in Ronnie's office. That's usually where Lily is. Those of you just joining us, I just finished doing the HH Holmes tour, but drunk. I think I did okay. I drank a lot for me, but that's not enough for most people. I've had a good hair day for once. Nicole, Lily is great. Lily acclimated very quickly. She's naughty, but... Oh, thanks, people. Thought I did okay. Yep. There hasn't been a new Holmes TV show or anything, and so enough interest to, like, do a whole tour based on it. Oh, here's Miles. Miles, were your ears burning? Do you hear us talking about you? You're staying up late waiting for the new Rolling Stones album to come out. Can't believe they're still doing it after all these years. Yeah. That is what I should buy instead, a red VW microbus. Fill it up with shovels and rakes and implements of destruction. Oh, thank you, Paul.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of the Bugle Call Rag.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, hop up. Uh-huh. 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 Well, do you think you'll get into the Dylan archives if I say that I need to find out whether Dylan knew about Arlo Guthrie's song Darkest Hour before he wrote Street Legal? It almost seems like a template for Street Legal songs, and it's very uncharacteristic of Arlo Guthrie. He said that it came to him in a dream, that song. Carol, as far as I know, Whiskey and a Cookie is going tomorrow. Miles, no, I am drunk. I don't think so. My old cat, Crookers, he knew when I was high, and he would come take care of me. I don't know if Miles would do that. So yeah, between the bus price going up and the car repairs, it was a $4,000 day. Not great.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the Bugle Call Rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Good night. Thank you, Susan. All right. We've rewound a little bit. We've gone on for quite a while tonight, I don't realize. Quick plug for upcoming events. Next Thursday night, I'll see if I can live stream this, but I will be at Hull House talking about the myths and mysteries of Hull House. With Hull House. That'll be next Thursday. I'll try to do something afterwards. I think it's at 6 o'clock. I'll do something at 7. Right? Right. Saturday at 11:30 and 2, Graceland Cemetery, few tickets left. Sunday, Rose Hill Cemetery at 11 o'clock, few tickets left once again. And again, please note, tomorrow night, the Friday night, there is not a bus tour. Everybody should have gotten cancellation notices and refunds by now. Next Thursday at 7, there is in fact, next Saturday at 7, there is a bus tour. But just the one. But all right. Kristen's got her tomatoes out to rot. Okay. We'll see. I'll post a link to it soon. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Thank you for joining me when I tried to make a complete fool of myself and tried not to spill too much tea. But all right, thanks for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tour saying stay safe and stay strong. And of course, if you can, do stay spooky.